All right, today we're going to do something pretty amazing. We're going to decode the blueprint of life itself, heredity. It's kind of like the hidden instruction manual that dictates everything from your height to the color of your eyes. So let's unravel the code that makes you, well, you.
I mean, it's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? You look in the mirror and you see this collage of your family. You've got your mother's eyes, maybe your father's smile, all mixed in with something that is completely, uniquely you. So how does that whole genetic lottery actually work? Well, that's exactly what we're here to find out.
So let's treat this like what it is, a family mystery. We're about to investigate it. But the clues, they aren't in fingerprints or old photographs. Nope. They're hidden deep inside our very own cells. And by following them, we can uncover the scientific rules that govern why we look the way we do.
Okay, so our first major clue is the concept at the very heart of this mystery, heredity. Simply put, it's just the process of passing traits from one generation to the next. Things like your height, your hair type, even your blood group. All of that stuff gets handed down through these tiny biological units we call genes.
But here's the thing. Heredity isn't just about making carbon copies. It's also the reason for all the differences between us, what scientists call variation. And this isn't just for show. This variation is literally the raw material for evolution itself. It's the key that allows entire species to adapt and survive over time.
All right, to really crack this case, we've got to learn the lingo, the language of genetics. A gene is basically the instruction for a trait. An allele is just a different version of that gene. Your genotype is the actual genetic code written in your DNA, while your phenotype is the physical trait we can actually see. And this is a big one. Some traits are dominant, they always show up, while others are recessive, meaning they can kind of hide in the background. Trust me, getting these terms down is key because they are about to unlock everything.
You know, every great mystery needs a great detective. And for the story of genetics, our detective was a guy named Gregor Mendel. He was an Austrian monk, and his incredibly meticulous work in his monastery garden, well, it laid the foundation for our entire understanding of heredity. It's no wonder they call him the father of genetics.
So, of all things, why peas? Well, turns out his choice was absolutely brilliant. For one, pea plants grow super fast. He could also precisely control their breeding. They had these really simple, distinct traits, tall versus short, or purple versus white flowers. And they produced a ton of offspring. So for an investigator looking for patterns, yeah, they were the perfect subjects.
So he's got his subjects chosen. Now it's time for the experiment that started it all. And to keep things simple, Mendel decided to focus on just one single trait at a time. This methodical approach, this was the absolute key to cracking the code. So check this out. Here's his first experiment. He took a purebred tall pea plant and crossed it with a purebred dwarf one. The result in this first generation, the F1 generation, was unexpected. Every single one of the offspring was tall. Not kinda tall, not a mix, all tall. It was as if the dwarf trait had just vanished completely. Then he let this new generation of tall plants self-pollinate just to see what would happen next.
And in that second generation, something truly remarkable happened. The dwarf trait, the one that had completely vanished, reappeared. But here's the kicker. It wasn't random. It came back in this strikingly consistent pattern. For every 3 tall plants, there was exactly 1 dwarf plant. This 3-to-1 ratio, this was a massive clue. How could a trait just disappear and then pop back up with such mathematical precision?
That perfect ratio led Mendel to a huge aha moment. He realized there had to be a difference between a plant's appearance, its phenotype, and its hidden genetic makeup, its genotype. This meant that a tall plant could secretly be carrying the instructions for being dwarf. At the time, this was a totally revolutionary idea.
This observation led him to his first great discovery, the law of dominance. It basically says that when 2 different alleles are present, only one, the dominant one, is actually expressed. The allele for tallness was dominant, and it completely masked the allele for dwarfness. This perfectly explained why that entire first generation of plants was tall. So in short, the law of dominance explains how one trait can completely mask another one. The recessive trait is still there, hanging out in the genes, you just can't see it, which is why the first generation looked entirely uniform. But hold on, the law of dominance didn't explain how the dwarf trait could come back. For that, Mendel came up with his second law, the law of segregation.
He theorized that an organism's two alleles for a trait actually separate during the formation of reproductive cells, or gametes, so that each gamete only gets one of them. And that was the missing piece of the puzzle. See, the alleles didn't blend or disappear, they stayed distinct and segregated. This meant it was possible for two tall plants, each carrying a hidden recessive allele, to pass those alleles on. And when two of those recessive alleles met up, a dwarf plant would appear. This law explained that 3-to-1 ratio perfectly. Okay, so Mendel was on a roll. He'd figured out how single traits were passed on. But what about multiple traits at the same time? Does having yellow seeds mean a plant is more likely to be tall? Or are different traits inherited independently of each other?
To answer this, he performed an even more complex experiment, a dihybrid cross, looking at two traits at once, like seed color and seed shape, and the results produced this beautiful complex ratio, 9-to-3 to 3-to-1. Now, this number might look complicated, but it was the final piece of evidence he needed.
That complex ratio could only be explained by his third and final law, the law of independent assortment. It means that the inheritance of one trait, like seed color, has absolutely no effect on the inheritance of another, like seed shape.
Think of it like a genetic assembly line where traits are sorted independently. This law is the reason for the incredible diversity of life. It allows for a near infinite shuffling of the genetic deck, creating endless new combinations of traits with every generation. And that's the very variation that fuels evolution.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time in a pea patch. But what does all this have to do with us? Let's bring these principles home and see how Mendel's laws explain why you are you.
A perfect human example is sex determination. Females have two X chromosomes, males have an X and a Y. Now, following Mendel's law of segregation, a mother can only pass on an X chromosome. So it's the father's contribution, either his X or his Y, that determines the sex of the child. It's a perfect 50-50 genetic coin toss.
It's also really important to distinguish between traits that are acquired versus traits that are inherited. You can build muscle at the gym, but you won't pass those muscles to your children. Your blood type, however, is written into your DNA from birth and is passed on. And it's only these inherited traits that are part of heredity's grand story. And this all brings us to the grand plan. Heredity is the force for continuity, faithfully passing the blueprint of life from one generation to the next. But it's the variation, that constant shuffling of the genetic deck governed by Mendel's laws, that provides the fuel for change. This powerful dance between continuity and change is the very engine of evolution. In the end, a monk's quiet work with pea plants revealed the fundamental rules of our very existence. Our genes provide the blueprint, a biological legacy passed down through countless generations. And this leads to one final crucial question. Given the blueprint